Hey everyone, welcome to the Beacon Breakdown. My name is Beacon, and today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to make these capsule handle setups with Flowtoys parts. If you watched my last video, it was on these 3D printed cases that go on their handles, and I was talking about how I was wanting something a little bit heavier than what this provides. Now that I've tried both of these a little bit, I'm really on the fence. I'm not too sure which one I'm going to end up going with. This one just feels absolutely perfect. It's the right size and everything. But this one has the weight that I'm wanting. This is 63 grams. This is 56 grams. The original is 54 grams, and the new one is around 46. The reason I was wanting something heavier is because I'm using these 100 millimeter, 200 gram heads from Flow on Fire, and they're probably around 230 with the capsules in it. So at 63 grams, this counterbalances this perfectly for me. I like a little heavier handle in general anyways, but when I was trying to do gunslingers earlier, I've never had it be so easy than with this setup. Now, I wanted something that was different than the original, just because the original has these really pronounced ridges on it, and it never felt good in my hand. It's flat on this side, but it's got the ridges on this side, and that really throws things off because I'm always having to readjust. So I wanted something perfectly round, and that's what I got here. As far as the length goes, this is the same length as this was originally. This was a little bit longer, but since I put a bigger rope in it, it shortened this a bit. This is the same width as this if you're like measuring from the ridge to ridge. If you're measuring flat to flat, this one is about a 1/16 of an inch bigger than this one. Now, originally, if you're using this attachment, which is a 3D printed nun-chuck attachment that Flowtoys sells, this will sit inside here, and those little set screws will go through there, and it'll hold it in place. I can't use it as it's designed though, just because it would have been way too long. So I had to modify this pretty heavily. I had to drill this out so the capsule was able to fit in the back. I had to drill the rope hole out so I could fit a bigger 3/8 inch rope. And then I had to cut this down as well. So I'm thinking I might, especially if I get interest in this, if other people want this, I might have these made in a little bit of a heavier duty plastic, and it'll fit better. Plus, if you can see right here, the the elastomer tubing is a little wider than this. So I think I'm going to have this made so that it kind of comes flush with this this outside part right here. So if you're interested in that, definitely let me know, and I can probably get a batch made up. So anyways, let's get started on how to put these things together. So the way I did this was I took the capsule handle apart, and it left me with the shell and the knob. This is the long shell. I then bought their polycarbonate tubing. This is the 1-inch stuff, and I cut it so that it was about a, I don't know, 1/8 of an inch longer than the shell. I then had to modify this 3D printed nun-chuck attachment. So I drilled this out to about 7/16, and that's because I use a 3/8 inch rope, and after a while it just, swells up from normal use. So I want this to be able to still slide on and off of this because I still have to access the charger port on the back. This is probably around 7/16. It's the plug that goes inside of the end of the capsule, so it's got to be able to slide in there. After I did that, I drilled this back end out to 11/16, and it was kind of a pain in the butt to do just because drilling 3D printed stuff doesn't work out sometimes because of the material, and also because it's hard to hold on to. So I put it in there like that, and then I drilled it from this end. I don't recommend doing that. It's definitely dangerous, but it worked. I drilled it down to about that point right there, and then I cut this right above where the screw hole is. And you might have to cut this at a different length depending on how long your polycarbonate tubing is. The next thing I did was, if you can see on this capsule here, there was these little tabs that stuck out that the washer sits around, the little tension washer. And I ground those down. So those are gone, but I left this little raised lip around it right there. And the reason that is because this is going to slide into the back side of this. So when it's in the back side of that, it keeps it nice and snug in here. But without that, since this is a short shell inside of this polycarbonate tubing, it has a little bit of play. So this is going to help that from moving. And if it does a little bit on the back, what I can probably do is get a piece of clear tape and wrap around it once or so, or take some hot glue and dab it a couple places, push this in, and then after about 30 seconds, twist it. It shouldn't stick to this very well. It will probably stick to this a bit better, especially if you rough up the edges. What I would do is use a Dremel and or sandpaper and just go in there and rough that up a little bit, only where that will not affect the light. So when it's all said and done, what should happen is this should sit flush on the back of that right there. If it doesn't, trim it down just a little bit. Now, the rope's going to be going through here, and the only thing that's going to be keeping the capsule from pulling out with the rope is this knob on the back. Now, if for whatever reason this C-clip back there fails, your capsule could fly off with your poi. So what I would recommend doing is gluing this in here, and I would use the Dremel to also roughen up the edges the same width as this right here, and then put super glue on this. This is a little bit narrower than this, so it has a little bit of play, which means that you can get the super glue on there, push this in there, and it's going to have a gap in there. So what you do, as long as your super glue is not on the back side of this to stick to this, stick this in there, and that will cause this whole thing to expand, or this thing to expand, and it should make a really tight mating surface. Next was to put the elastomer tubing on there, and this was a little bit of a challenge. I think people say they can put rubbing alcohol or something on there and it'll slide on better. What I ended up doing was I had this longer piece here, and I put just a little bit of it on there. I had this out, and I held onto there so the air couldn't blow through, and then I had somebody holding a air chuck from an air compressor on the inside of this tube, and when they hit the air, this thing ever so slightly expands, and it creates this little air buffer between this and the elastomer tubing, and this whole thing should slide on. Then took a razor blade and just went around this edge here, and got it the best I could. This could be better, but for my first try, it ended up working all right. Now, what I did notice is that the light comes out pretty much straight out versus something that's a little more diffused. This elastomer tubing helps diffuse it a little bit, but when I'm moving this back and forth, it's not going to show up on this camera very well, but the LED looks like it's covering, or it's filling in a little bit more, where this one, it's more there's just a line that you see, or not a line, but just the tracer for where the LED was at. And both ways look good, but if you want this to cover even a little bit more, what I would recommend doing is taking some sandpaper, some rough sandpaper there, and kind of roughing up the capsule, and that should help the light disperse just a little bit better. So I hope this has helped some people out. If you like this setup and you use it, let me know. If you want these plastic pieces, let me know, and if I get enough responses, as I said, I'll try to make them so they fit this a little bit better. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.